Hello again. In this second part of the demonstration videos for Tashkent, we will pick up on the data collection sequence. So we've already created an eco project, configured that, and then we've generated a data collection link in an email, which I have here in front of me. And what happens when we click that, say if we are in the field and working with a smartphone or an iPad or some device with internet connectivity, we should then have a browser page that will open up. And one thing to keep in mind with this before we start is that this is running web forms. So these are web pages that you are seeing with the mobile data collection system. So you have to be careful with this. You don't want to close out your browser while you're working with this in mid-project. You always want to make sure that you submit any data that you have at the end of a session or periodically throughout a day. So this is not an app. It's not storing data on the device. It is just holding it in the browser cache. So that's important to remember because you don't want to backspace. You don't want to close this out because you can potentially lose data. So when you first come to this screen, it'll ask you to log in. And again, it's just browser. So you're just advancing screens here basically. And what you'll see is that you have an options button in the upper left hand. And this is where you can change some of the settings. So here, if you want to look at scientific names, you only have the option of English and Spanish, unfortunately. If you are working in circumference or diameter, you can change that. If you wanted to list more trees per page, you can change things there in your settings. This is how you submit data. So once we collect data, we'll come back here to submit that. And reloading project is something to be careful with. What this does is it pulls in a new project configuration. So only do this if you know that all data has been submitted, because it will clear any unsubmitted data that you have in the cache. So if we were to go back and change a desktop, this is when we would use the reload project. So project management is critical to coordinate with any field data collectors because you don't want them doing this unless they absolutely have to. The project key, this is a good way to verify that field collectors are using the current key. You can see that in the desktop project also. Then the about screen just tells you a little bit more about iTree. So I backed out of that. Now I'm at the home screen, and when we want to start collecting trees, what we do is just simply hit that plus. So we're advancing the form. And what you'll see here is that in eco data collection, there are different categories. So the first one would be your general information. So this is where we have just basic tree information. You can see here that we have species at the top. So when we select a species, it has somewhat of a dynamic search panel here. So as I start typing, let's say we are looking for a tulip tree. Now it's not showing me anything because I have common name here. So if I put scientific name, then you can see it starts populating that, the menus below. And then I could just click that. And so now I've got tulip tree there, and then this is our stratum. So here again, if you recall, I set this up with the different districts. I don't recall where this central district is, but we'll just use this one for now. You can add in comments here if this is helpful. There's a photo option, but this is not for taking an actual image file. This is only if you're taking image files and you want to document, say, image 1 on my camera is for this particular tree one. So it will not store images. It doesn't have that structure or that capacity for storing actual image files. So this is somewhat useful, but not really that much. It doesn't link images to the actual file. So once we have this information here, we hit save. Okay. So now we've got general information. So the map coordinates is something new, and this is why I kind of wanted to do this, because it takes a long time to write out instructions for this, even though we do have some written instructions now too. So when we hit this, you will see initially it has 3 options. It's a little bit much here to digest. So the first option is just manually typing in latitude and longitude if you want that information, or if you have a very precise device, you can use that. The second option is to use the device's GPS. So this may or may not be accurate depending on the device. So if you're just using a smartphone, it might say that it is within 3 meters, but in fact it might actually show up 15 meters or even farther off. So what we have is a newer option, which we like to call tap on a map. And so this is where you actually digitize on a map to show the location. So if you hit this find my location button here, it'll actually take you to where you are, ideally based on where your smartphone, if you have the location enabled. So this is where I'm at in this neighborhood in Chicago. The other thing you can do is you can also change the aerial image. So Google and Bing, hopefully these are allowed in Uzbekistan. In some places they're not, so that could be an option, a problem too. We just don't know. Now in this case, what I'm going to do is just kind of override this and type in a location. Okay. So let's say we're working in this center square and we're just collecting some of the data for some of these younger trees. So what you would do here, and again, you would be in the field, so I have no idea how this will work for you, is that you would just start, and you can see here the image is a little bit fuzzy, and this is the Bing image, which is a little bit more clear, but it's more outdated. The trees aren't as old here. So we would just click on the location. So this is actually a pretty accurate way if it works, because you're actually clicking on the location of a tree. And then once we scroll up, it populates the latitude and longitude based on where you clicked. Now if you're off, you can move that. So you can zoom in as best you can and try to get it as accurate as you can. And so it's a nice feature, so you don't have to do post-processing, because the phone GPS usually is not that good. So hopefully this will work for you. So once we have that data, we then advance the screen. So again, be careful not to backspace, because that could delete out data. And then we will go ahead and put into tree details. So right here, the only thing I had was the crown dieback. And again, if you recall, this is based on dieback, so this is going to equate to condition. So if we say that a tree has very minimal or no dieback, that's going to be saying that it's excellent in this particular case. And then we'll save that. And so stems is a tree diameter. And then we will just enter in a diameter for our tree. The diameter height is the distance from the ground to chest height where you're measuring the tree, typically. And this is usually checked. It just means that you're able to measure it as opposed to estimating it. If you were doing trees on private property and had to estimate something because you could not get to that tree, you would uncheck that. It doesn't affect anything though. And then we'll save that and move on. So we have our stem information there. We can then back out of the stem menu. And then we have management information. So these were the optional things that I set up in the project configuration. If you recall, we had priority tasks, and so these were just some of the things that may be relevant for management. Here we can just have none, and then heritage tree, again, this was just a simple yes or a non-entered value if it was no, and then we'll hit save. And then we'll hit save tree 1, so that backed me out, took me to the beginning, and then I'll hit save. And so now I have that tree available, and I can go ahead and then enter on, go to my next tree, and then start doing data collection for that. So I'll go ahead and enter in data for another tree now, and then I'll add in a couple more, probably speed up the video so that you don't have to sit through this, and then I'll get to the point where I'm going to submit the data. So now we have 2 trees. I'm going to pause this so that I can enter a couple more and then we'll come back. Okay, so I populated 10 trees and just added in some larger ones across the underpass along this walkway too, just so there's a little bit of a variety. One thing I just wanted to mention also is that you can go back. So say you made a mistake, you can hit one of these trees that you've already had collected and then go in and update the information if needed. So in this particular case, I forgot to put the correct stratum for that tree. Just make sure that you hit save and then move forward. Again, just advance back out. So if I wanted to continue collecting data, all I would have to do is hit plus. But say I'm done for the day or I'm taking lunch and I just want to submit these so they're off my smartphone. So we'll go back to options and then we'll hit submit data. And so it tells me that I have 10 trees and then I've got the option here to submit. And that's it. Your data has been submitted. So since I have this active, I will go back to my desktop. And so again, this would be working with the project manager. So ideally, if you test this out and you submit some data, I should be able to come back to the desktop here and see if there's any, I have to go back to retrieve from mobile actually, see if there's any data available. So this shows my data that's been submitted, and you could submit as many times as you like throughout the day. Generally, we say try to submit at least a couple times. It depends how many trees can a device hold. Really depends on the device, but in some cases it can hold a great deal of trees on there as long as you don't have a lot of cache space used for things like pictures and so forth. So all I'm going to do now is check that. And so again, this is a desktop function, so you will not be able to do this unfortunately until you install Eco on a machine in Tashkent. And then we'll retrieve the data. It tells me I successfully imported that data. I now can go back and check the trees, and then I should see the trees that I just populated. So again, that's from creating a project, sending the data collection link to the server to any field device. So multiple people can collect data at the same time, or they can actually, if they're using paper forms, they can enter the data using the mobile data collection so that they can submit it. So you could have many people collecting data and entering data to send back to the project manager. So there's a lot of different ways you can use that, even if you don't want to use phones out in the field, or if the phones don't work and you have alternative methods for collecting data. Then we could look at importing that into Eco too. So there's several options, but that's just a quick overview. Yeah, good luck and let us know if you're able to collect some data, and then I'll try to pull it in and then we can run this. Bye for now.